All right. Oh, dude. Oh, why is it so loud? Gotta turn that. I thought I had the volume low, but
I feel like we actually need like some type of like requiem music, something that's really.
Here, let me see what I got. Let me see what I got.
Somber. Yeah, I feel like we need some. Yeah, this is kind of more in that vein, I would say.
Let's see what else we got here. And hey, everybody, we're going to get started in just a minute. But we're trying to get the right mood music because this week's episode was a little
yeah. See,
dramatic.
Like this is like up, This is upbeat. This is making me think like, hey, like we're on a journey. We're gonna get somewhere.
Exactly.
It's a very different show than the one that we're watching right now.
Yeah. Seriously.
I actually wrote for notes, and everybody knows how much I love notes. And I made a ton of them. I wrote for episode 3, which I actually felt was appropriate that it was episode 3 of the Obi-Wan show. And by the way, like, spoilers, I'm not these aren't going to be spoilers, but we're going to get into spoilers eventually in the show here. And I feel like, Jeff, maybe we can even take like the first 15-20 minutes for anybody that hasn't watched the show yet. We could spend the next 15-20 minutes just talking about our impressions of the show, and then maybe we can get into some spoilers after that. But I just felt like it was tension. It was like, and there were all of these reversals, which I love. Like, I love when a person thinks I've solved something, and then they didn't, and then in fact it's worse. And then it's like, like there were a lot of reversals, and I love when that happens in a show. I really enjoy reversals. Did I find this show something that I'd be like sitting down, eating a sandwich, saying, yeah, like I want to sit down and watch episode 3 of the Obi-Wan show? I don't think I would do that.
No, not so much.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like afterwards, I'm like, I really just need like a cup of tea and a warm blanket. I need to be cozy for a few minutes.
I'm not gonna lie. So I know you did the same thing, Jeff. And it's just like a heads up to people who are gonna watch this show, and we're fans. I'm a fan of this. I went for a walk after the show. And then I watched it again so that way I could take my notes, because my normal path is I watch the show for my own personal enjoyment anytime we do the show reviews, I always know that I need to take a lot of notes. And so I watched the show a second time right before we came on here. Watched episode 3 again. And yeah, man, like I'm bummed out. It is a rough, what is that, 47 minutes?
I think so, yeah.
Rough.
I think that's what it was.
47 minutes. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. We're gonna get all into it in just a second, but yeah, this latest episode was I don't even know how to best just put it into words, but like, talk about processing your trauma. Like, talk about processing trauma. Like, this was not. It reminded me. It was like an emotion. This episode reminded me of the feeling, the traumatic feeling that we have of Jyn Erso near the beginning of Rogue One when she is on that prison planet. So the dark and dreary nature. So the way that was filmed, and the filters they used, and the lighting control, and the lack of lots of speaking, that feeling that you had watching that from all the visual effects, I got that same sort of feeling from this show, just from the interactions and the dialogue. It was interesting because there was just so much. But you know what I think we should do? We should get into it.
Yeah,
let's get into it. And we'll just
make
dive
a
in.
start.
Let's just do
let's make a start.
All right. Oh. I always fail at that.
And I'm Brandon, I think, because Brandon was here in the last episode.
I will fix that, because you were not Brandon.
Yeah, I'm Brandon right now. But I don't mind being Brandon. Brandon's a really cool guy and has amazing opinions. In fact, I'm looking forward to when we can have him back on the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ryan, dude, it is good to have you. Why is this scene? I'm trying to unlock the scene so I can move your name over just a little bit. There we go. Now it's all pretty.
Hey.
See, now it's all pretty. We're all good. We're here. It's a safe space for everybody. We're gonna process our.
Safe
We're gonna
space.
process. We're gonna process. We're gonna be feel seen and feel heard. It's gonna be okay. But I changed. So the title that's on YouTube and the other places is a little different that I have up above there. But my wife and I were talking after watching the episode, and I was like, what should we call this? And like several names came to mind, but like I can't come up with it. I don't want to even put anything campy because it isn't. This entire episode. And by the way, for everyone watching, I'll just throw this up here right now so that everyone knows, just in case.
Oh yeah, spoilers.
Oh,
Yeah,
where's my sound
into-
effect? Where's my sound effect?
Yeah.
There you go.
We're gonna be getting
Spoilers.
into it.
Yeah, there are spoilers if you have not watched episode 3, episodes 1 and 2. But really, if you haven't watched episode 3 yet, you need to go back and watch those before you watch this show tonight because we're gonna really get into it.
Yeah. I mean,
This-
before we get into spoilers, it'd be great. It'd be great to maybe hear you and hear you and having you watch this with your wife. It'd be great to hear what both of you just kind of thought, like what emotions came forth. Was there anything? And I because I made a list. Was there anything in addition to hearing the emotions that it evoked as you and your family were watching this? I would also say I'm sure it's just you and your wife because this is definitely not a kid.
Oh no,
episode.
my 6.5-year-old was not watching the show for a minute. I was like, dude, you might. I was thinking, oh, this will be great. He'll watch Obi-Wan Kenobi. We'll get through the first 2 episodes. He hasn't seen it. Then he watched this one tonight. I'm like, he's not watching this. There's just
I
no
just
way.
got done telling my wife. I was like, yeah, this show's not for kids.
No.
But what emotions, like, how did you guys feel about it? And then the second question I have is did this remind you of anything? And like other movies, other artwork, is there other things that this reminded you of? So that's kind of the 2 questions I think might be fun to start with because they're not spoilery.
Yeah, this is a really okay. So I'm gonna get more real than I usually do. 2 things. The first one is I'll say what the emotions it made me feel. So for everybody who's watched the show for a while who knows me, my wife battled cancer a couple years ago, and for 6 weeks she was undergoing radiation therapy 7 days a week. For 6 weeks. I would drive her 45 minutes to go get radiation treatment every morning. So very intense radiation treatment every day. But they got it. She's been free and clear now for a year. There's no trace. She goes back periodically, has tests done, and they see no trace of it whatsoever. Things are great. Like it's exactly what you would hope for. All good stuff. But the reason I give that example is there's been a lot in our family since my son was born. My son has cystic fibrosis, which for anyone who doesn't know is a genetic and terminal disease. He will not die of it, which is great because the medications have changed so much. But we've been dealing with those things since he was a baby. We learned it when he was 2 weeks old. We learned he had this. My wife battling cancer. I've been going through anxiety and depression therapy for about a year now. I'm on medication now, which is great. It's the next tool in my journey. But the reason I bring all those things up is we're finally comfortable. My wife and I are finally becoming comfortable using the word trauma in a very real sense. These are very traumatic things you deal with in your life. I'm able to talk about it now. The word trauma really is the thing that I can define this episode. Everything that happened in the episode, from my perspective, all centered around the trauma that Obi-Wan is not allowing himself to deal with. He is trying to stay away from this trauma. He's not really letting himself process this trauma, and it's evidenced in various scenes throughout the episode. And I know we'll get back into that in a minute. The thing that it reminded me of, the other content it reminds me of, broadly speaking, are dystopian movies.
Yeah.
But more specifically, dystopian movies where there's low to no hope. So I'll give you some examples that I can think of because there are dystopian movies that aren't like that. So like Fahrenheit 451 ends very hopefully. There's a lot of hope at the end of that movie. Fantastic movie. Logan's Run. Same thing. Also, a lot of hope at the end of Logan's Run. But some other movies like Soylent Green, to a degree. I'm trying to think of the one with Christian Bale from years ago and Taye Diggs. I think it was Taye Diggs for a number of years ago.
Equilibrium.
Even
Good
1984.
selection.
Even 1984. Because at the very end of that, it's not that there's no hope. It's that you realize there's just no hope. There's no escaping this. Like, this is just what, at the end of that book, at the end of that movie, This is just the world that they're in, and there's no getting away from that. And that style of movie to me, and that style of storytelling, where at the end things just circle back to where they were before. That's what it feels like in this episode to me. The show in general, but this episode in specific felt like a dystopian story where there's seemingly no hope, or your main protagonist seemingly has no hope of things changing or being different, and they're not sure how to process that. I think that's the best way I can describe it. How about you? How about you?
By the way, like, you know, kudos to you and your family. You know, you all are. And by the way, if people know Jeff, he's like, you know, wildly positive and always positive. And I appreciate that outlook on life. And I appreciate you bringing up trauma, because I feel like there are things in life that happen to you that are irrevocable. And you know, you have a main character in this episode. And by the way, like, gosh, if here we're talking about a show, this is not The Mandalorian. This is not the Book of Boba Fett.
No,
this is not a show for kids. Definitely not a show for children. And I remember, I think the last episode I said, oh yeah, I watched this. I think, and really it's my oldest who's about to turn 15. I thought, oh, you know, maybe I'll sit down and watch this with her. But what you just said about trauma, is, you know, these events in life that happen, and they are irrevocable, and you can't unmake them and you can't undo them. They also cause a tremendous amount of magical thinking, where you think, oh, I wish, you know, maybe if I'd done this differently, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And so you ultimately just learn to process it, to handle it. It becomes it doesn't have to define you, but it becomes a thing that you define in your life. And that is what I feel we're getting in this show. I will say, though, it is wearing me out. Like, watching this show is wearing me out. And the movie that it reminds me of is actually a couple of things. There's a handful of things that this reminded me of. Two things recently, though, is the movie that was made is a couple of years ago. It's made by the guy that did Gravity, and for some reason now I'm of course blanking on his name. He won an Academy Award for Roma. Anyway, his name, he filmed a movie called Children of Men.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it stars Clive Owen.
I remember that. It was,
and
oh my gosh, that was intense.
It is an intense. It's not Children of Men intense. You know, it's not there. But oh my gosh, is it up there? Like, yeah, it's and that's what I meant by, like, these are episodes that seem to be building on tension, building on there's a couple of other things which I feel like is a very Old West thing that's in this, which is the two R's that occur in Westerns, the Revenant and the Reckoning. And a Revenant being a ghost of the past that is looking for justice, and a reckoning that has to happen. In fact, there was a lot of times where, especially when they're kind of on that mining planet, I kept thinking of Once Upon a Time in the West with harmonica and the ghosts that are on the horizon. I kept thinking that those things brought up a lot. And then the other one was Old Man Logan, which is a comic book series that's set in an alternate version of the Marvel universe, where things have just gone terribly wrong, and Wolverine, Logan, is an old man, and he's got a family, and he's got to set off on a mission with Hawkeye, and it's crazy. And they ended up adapting that to be a very dramatic tension-filled, reckoning-filled movie called Logan. So it's somewhere between Children of Men and Logan, and Old Man Logan. If you read that comic book, which is hard to read, that's what this show is. I don't mean this in like a negative connotation. This show is hard to watch.
Yeah.
That is the best way that I could describe this. It is at times hard to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. And a large portion of that is because, and actually, it's one of the notes I wrote down for myself, which is, and I did not, I tried and I could not catch the name of the mining planet they go to. It's like Methuso
it's not marzipan, but it sounds like that. It's like
it was something
Marpaz or something. You know?
I tried doing the like on the Apple TV, like what did she say? But it got too far and it didn't, and I didn't want to try to turn on closed captioning. So anyway, while they're on that planet and they're walking through the desert, and you see like these pockets of stormtroopers harassing or accosting people or making them do things in various places, or working with the loader droids, as we see. They don't notice Obi-Wan and Leia walking in the distance on their own trail, but there's like hill in the foreground, hill in the background, and in the mid-ground you see Obi-Wan and Leia walking. And I thought it was fascinating because when you watch that, these little pockets don't see them. They don't notice them walking on the road at all.
Yeah.
And as they're walking and they're talking, there's a moment where Obi-Wan had on the ship, had tried to commune, had meditated, tried to commune with Qui-Gon, ended up connecting basically with Anakin. And when he's on the planet, he has a hallucination and sees Anakin in the distance.
Yeah, and at this point, by the way, everyone, we're going to move into spoilers. So if you have not seen this episode, if you have not seen this episode, you can watch it now. Or you can watch it in the morning, which I might recommend, because then you can like kind of, take a break.
I apologize. I should have done that again before I threw that out there.
No, it's a weighty episode, and I really like the things that you brought up, because I felt that same dystopian future of what is in like Children of Men, which, by the way, the same high level of tension, the same type of journey where someone's trying to escort someone to safety. But yeah, like jump right into this.
Yeah. So
and by the way, Children of Men, yes, also amazing and incredible.
Yeah,
I see Joanna's comment on there. I could not agree more.
Yeah, I agree with you too, Joanna. I've been able to watch that movie one time. It's not a movie I can go back and really watch again, but I did see it the once. And you know what? Also, sorry, before I continue, another movie it reminded me a lot of. It took me a moment to remember this, but I've only seen this movie once. Was Man on Fire with Denzel Washington, ex-CIA agent.
Yeah.
Because the trauma he's dealing with, and even in the end, like he gets shot at one point, but he just sticks with it for a while, and he keeps like floating in the pool, and blood comes out, but then he kind of bandages himself so he can take care of this old girl. But in the very end, it just ends with him going away. Like it doesn't end with a big murder or something else. It ends with he gives himself up and he just is gone. But he kind of like off into the sunset, but not in the positive way. Like off more into like a dark sunset or something. I don't know. It made me feel the same way.
It's the end of the Searchers, man. It's the end of the Searchers. That's not a happy ending for John Wayne's character. And by the way, that movie's really problematic. Like if you like, just trigger warnings all over the place on that movie. But I'm just letting you know that the thing you're talking about is like a Revenant, which is, but by the way, the movie The Revenant, also made by an amazing director. But yeah, it's these are the ghosts of the Old West. And so you were just talking about a ghost.
I'm sorry. So he's walking, Obi-Wan and Leia are walking on this path, and at one point Obi-Wan kind of gets back in his head again, and he sees basically a hallucination of Anakin on a hilltop off to the distance. Anakin, not Darth Vader, but actual Anakin at the time of the Duel of the Fates, and he turns and looks at him. And the two things happen. One, the music changes. We hear sort of the muffled sound of like Leia talking to him in the background. So he's lost. He's kind of out of touch for a moment. There's the not quite shaky cam, but the like almost like Michael Bay-ish perspective that changes on him, on his face to let you know that we are in his inner mind as this is happening. I wrote down basically what we are seeing, in my opinion, is his trauma come out in these hallucinations and meditations, because he's not letting himself really process the trauma. He can't talk to anyone about it. He can't get it out. And as a result, it's tearing him apart.
Yes.
And actually, I think that's even more evidenced when he finally does meet up with Vader later in the episode. And Vader makes the comment, time hasn't been good to you, or whatever the wording was he used.
Time has made you weak. I
There it
wrote that
was.
down. Time
And
has made you weak.
I'm sure you have some other views on that particular scene, but one of the things that I connected this early scene in the show to, with Vader saying that, is he's not lying. Again, as you've said before, Vader is not lying. Obi-Wan is not processing his trauma. Vader, on the other hand, is having to process his trauma in a very real way every single day of his entire existence. He doesn't ever
Yes.
get to let it go. Obi-Wan is trying to repress it continuously. And so when Vader says the line that he does, I think it's actually very indicative of what Obi-Wan is kind of doing to himself, and it actually has made him weaker, but not as a Force user. It's made him weaker as a person, because he's not letting himself process this thing that humans naturally need to be able to process, or else it eats you up from the inside. And to your point, that interaction, or that kind of confluence between the early scene and the trauma coming out in his meditation on the cargo ship and then on the planet when they're walking, and that brief line from Vader towards the end of the show, or the end of the episode, it really struck me. It really hit me, because it definitely, to me, it is purely indicative of, it's almost allegorical to watch Obi-Wan and say, this is what it looks like when you do not take care of your mental health, when you do not allow yourself to process the trauma in your life. This is exactly what it looks like in a very real way.
Yeah, I just felt like, and I'm actually having a hard time reconciling the character that I knew. And I don't mean this, like, I don't mean the Obi-Wan from the prequels. I don't mean the Obi-Wan from episode 4, even though I feel like the Obi-Wan from the original Star Wars is carrying a lot of weight. I didn't really know if it was guilt, but he's carrying a lot of weight, and he's obviously carrying a lot of secrets. And in this, though, what I saw, and this was the word that I wrote down in my little notes, is I just saw a person I saw desperation. That's what I kept writing. The levels of desperation that I see this person at. Vader, but again, like we're getting into it, everybody. So the weight of this episode is the you know what, the writers for this show were like, we're gonna get to it, guys, we're gonna just go right to it. And Vader and Obi-Wan have their conflict on this show. They immediately bring together their antagonist and their protagonist right away. There's no build up to it. I mean, I guess the last 2 episodes you could say would be a build up, but they bring them together. And I think that's great, because I think that a lot of streaming series run for 10 hours. And they don't know what to do, so they fill it in with a lot of side plots, and it feels like a game of Legend of Zelda, where it's like, yeah, or Mario, your princess is not in this castle, so you got to go do the next one. In this one, they jump right to it. And, you have someone who's coming in like Vader. He appears, ignites his lightsaber, and sees Obi-Wan in the desert. And Obi-Wan does a thing that is the opposite of what you would expect, which is he runs away. He runs away. He holds on to his lightsaber in a way that's like, he is scared. There was a thing in Old Man Logan in the comic book and in the movie, but more in the comic book. Obi-Wan, Old Man Logan is telling everybody, it's Wolverine. And what does everyone think of when they think of Wolverine? He's got the Wolverine claws, and Wolverine doesn't. He says, I don't pop my claws anymore. I haven't popped my claws in 20 years. I'm not going to start popping them now. And it's because he's moved on from that life, and he's been beaten down, and now he's just trying to live on his own. This incredibly traumatic thing happens in that comic book, and then his claws, it's the shink shink. I'm doing the sound wrong from the comic books, but he has he pops his claws, And this whole time, all these episodes keep building up to Obi-Wan pulling out his lightsaber and not using it, pulling out his lightsaber and not using it. I keep thinking, oh yeah, he's not going to pop his claws. And so then when he takes it out, though, it's not in the way that Logan does or anybody else. He's actually afraid, and you can see that. You can see how he's just not the character we left in episode 3. He's definitely not the character we see in episode 4, who, when he runs into Vader on the Death Star, he just ignites his lightsaber and it's like, it's go time. Instead, it's something else. And I kept thinking about a line that he has with Leia, where Leia asks him, what does the Force feel like?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And he says, because, you know, she's curious about the Force, and wouldn't anybody be? And he says, do you know what it's like? You know, think about when you're in the dark, and then you turn the light on, and how do you feel? And she says, safe. And he says, that's what the Force feels like when the light comes on. But I actually thought about that a little bit differently, which was, I thought about what the Force as analogous to, have you ever been in like the dark? Like, I grew up in the country, and I remember I'd go out and I'd be in the dark, like in the real dark and by myself. And I didn't know if anything was out there, but man, it felt like something was. And, you know, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And that's a thing that I thought was that, man, if that wouldn't be a good analogy for the Force, the thing you can't see, but you can feel. And that was actually the thing I thought when he's running through the desert in the dark, that Obi-Wan is trying to escape that boogeyman that's haunting him. And he's gonna have to face it. And he's just so desperate to not do that, and is just so weakened by how and when I mean weak, I don't mean that in like a physicality. I mean like,
right.
He's running away.
Down.
Yeah,
he's broken down.
Broken down.
I wrote down a note of I wrote he is very phenolic and negative at this point in his life. And I wrote down his kind of evidence on the mining world when he snaps at Leia when they get to the coordinates and there's nobody there. And she says, well, maybe they're just not here yet. He's like, no one's coming. It can't possibly be here. They won't. It's like, whoa, dude. Like his reaction is very phenolic. Like, it's binary. He actually, somebody tweeted, I saw, I thought only Sith dealt in absolutes.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, that scene. I'm like, that's so interesting because exactly what you just said. It's beyond even the resignation. Like, I thought it was just resignation in the first episode, but now it's a very different emotion in this episode, or set of emotions. It's not simply resignation. To your point, he is broken down and weakened, and it's got him in a state of, like, this is what a person is without the Force to fall back on, no, not even the Force. This is a person who doesn't have a center. This is, as I've talked about this concept that I feel in anyway about the Jedi in the Skywalker era, and this isn't Obi-Wan in this show right now. At this point in the show, is no exception to this. Why I've always believed Yoda was actually the detriment of most of the Jedi, and like was not the greatest teacher because they weren't able to convey, even to Obi-Wan for that matter, how to go back and find their center. Like, what is the center point that you can base all of your decisions off of, the center point of your life that you can base things off of, so that when all else fails, so to speak, you can fall back on this center point. It could be I don't want to say your shining light, but it's a place inside your mind you can go to say, but this is my base. How do I start back from this place again? And he's clearly either lost what that is or doesn't know what that is at this point in his life, because you watch him and he doesn't know where to go with his emotions. He doesn't know where to go with his mind. Either he's blocking himself from seeing it, he doesn't know what it is, he's not prepared for it. But to your point, I think the word weakened is a really good way to describe it, because he is not ready for what is happening around him. Because he's allowed himself to be unready for it because he's not processing these things.
Yeah, and I would just say too, like, he doesn't do any of the things that Jedi would do. Like, they're in the midst of, like, they're on the run. again, it's very Children of Men style. He's on the run with this person that represents a hope for. In Children of Men, it's hope for humanity, and in this movie, it's hope for the galaxy, right? And he doesn't do any things that a Jedi would do. Like, Jedi get caught up in things all the time, and then even Anakin in Episode 3, Obi-Wan says, well, what should we do? And Anakin says, "We'll wait." Choosing to wait. That's not doing nothing. That's choosing to wait. And the thing that I was thinking about in that is when Yoda and Empire is, I think, the best way when I think of Yoda. Like, I wish Yoda was only an Empire, to be honest. And that Jedi came to Dagobah and like trained with Yoda and then left. But that Luke says, "How will I know the good from the bad?" Like, how, because he's once you start down the dark path, forever will dominate your destiny, consume you, like Obi-Wan's apprentice. And Luke says, "Well, how will I know the good from the bad?" Which is a great question, by the way. And Yoda says, "You'll know when you're calm, at peace, passive." And I kept expecting Obi-Wan to do Obi-Wan things like wait, be patient, rest. The Force will provide. And I think that what you're seeing is not just a person who is desperate for trying to complete their mission. I think they've, to your point about like, center of your life, like this guy is a lost faith. Like, there's no trust in the Force. There's no trust in, there's no leap of faith of Obi-Wan. He doesn't trust anybody or anything. He has a hard time being around a child. He helped raise a child not much older than this to become a Jedi. I just was watching this and I was like, man, this character is so far from where we left this person in Episode 3. And Return of the Jedi, I'm sorry, Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3. I am really interested to see where this goes as a limited series to get us more closer to the person that we see in A New Hope, who is somehow reckoned with all of this and is able to say to Darth Vader, "You're only a master of evil. And, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine." That's someone who has a reckoning and is a person that has faith in at least what they're doing. This was a lot different, and it was hard to see a character that personally I've enjoyed over the years quite a bit. And it would be like me watching a whole series about how R2's like a liar or something. I don't know how you'd convey that, but or R2's some type of master criminal. Like, R2's my favorite character. But yeah, this was like really hard to see a character that's like this to be so broken. I actually think this is what they were really going for with Luke in The Last Jedi, which I actually feel like Mark Hamill evoked very well. Is people having to deal with trauma, having to deal with their decisions that they've made, the actions that they've committed to. This was a lot.
Yeah.
This was a lot.
Something you said triggered a thought for me. In both instances where we see Obi-Wan attempt to commune with Qui-Gon, and obviously this is reminiscent of going back to Revenge of the Sith when Yoda tells him that he can teach him how to commune with Qui-Gon. And for anyone who's watched the Clone Wars animated series, season 6, I believe, maybe it was season 5, but I think it was season 6, when Yoda goes to goes to this particular Force planet and he meets the Wills and he learns how to actually live in the living Force, basically become a Force ghost. And Qui-Gon had already learned it, and he learns it as well. What I noticed is that Obi-Wan attempts to meditate at the beginning of Episode 3. And one other point, he wasn't meditating, but one other point he does reach out. He's like
begging.
He's like, Master
begging.
Qui-Gon, please help me. In this, he appears to be trying to meditate. But what I find fascinating about his attempt at meditation is it's not, as I understand meditation, ignoring for the Jedi for a minute, what I understand about meditation generally is it's an idea, a way of centering your mind on one thing, not purely to clear your mind, because you're not ever going to really get to that. It's for the purpose of attempting to clear your mind, to allow yourself to focus on a singular thing and let these other things drop away, or try to let them drop away, so you can kind of center yourself before you come back into the waking world and do what you're going to do for a variety of health, mental health and physical health reasons. And in this, when you watch Obi-Wan attempt to meditate at the beginning of the episode 3, as I perceived it, he wasn't doing it for the purpose of trying to center himself, or the words you used to describe. What he's doing is trying to get Qui-Gon to talk to him. He's trying to get an answer. He's trying to get something to tell him what to do next or how to move forward. And as you were talking, and I was remembering these couple scenes, I was like, he's trying to talk to Qui-Gon. He just wants Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon, can you just talk to me? Qui-Gon, can you talk to me? He's always waiting. He's like waiting for that moment to happen for him that's going to give him his next step and kind of make him feel like he can take the next step. And what's interesting to me is this is very reminiscent to me of which Harry Potter movie is it? It's the Prisoner of Azkaban in Harry Potter when he gets the time device, and he goes.
Also directed, by the way, by Alfonso Cuarón, who did. By the way, I can remember his name. Alfonso Cuarón, who directed Children of Men.
There you go.
Great director. Go on ahead.
Yes, so he did the time thing in the Harry Potter movie, and when he did it, and when he did this whole scene, he sees, like, he's on the beach, he's trying to save Sirius, and he sees someone in the distance do a particular spell, the Patronus, and saves everybody, or saves the situation.
Spoilers for Harry Potter.
Sorry about that. For a very old movie as well, or a relatively old movie. Hopefully I didn't spoil that for anybody. But in any case, and then when he goes back in time, and he gets back to that scene, and it's actually him doing the spell, this to me feels, what happened in Obi-Wan feels very reminiscent of that. It's like he's constantly waiting for this other thing to happen. And look, there was the other thing. It's right there. Clearly something else is going to help me. Someone's going to give me this. But then in Harry Potter, when he's finally confronted with the situation and all the duress lands on his shoulders, he has to be the one to step in and finally realize it's actually him who is doing it. And I really believe that that's what's going to play out here. And what we are seeing is he's trying to get Qui-Gon to reply to him. Even if Qui-Gon could reply to him right now, I really wonder if Qui-Gon is not intentionally to force Obi-Wan to learn this lesson that you have to deal with these things on your own. I cannot help you with that anymore. I can be here to give you guidance when you're ready, when you are actually ready for this guidance. But right now isn't the time for someone else to guide him. Right now is the time, as we learn in Master and Apprentice with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in that particular book, when at the very end, when Qui-Gon finally answers to him why Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan's always wondering why Qui-Gon wouldn't let him train in more advanced saber skills, made him stay with the basics when all his friends are doing other things. And Qui-Gon essentially tells him, he's like, I wanted you to be so good at the basics that you never have to even think about them. You just do, so that you could learn. He goes, you are more than talented enough, Obi-Wan, to do all of these others. I wanted you to be so good that they're just part of who you are. You don't have to ever think about it. And I think that's the lesson that Qui-Gon is probably trying to teach, or that Obi-Wan has to learn right now, that all of these things that you learned as a Jedi your entire life, you need to be able to fall back on those, but you're not letting yourself do that, and it's got you stuck. And it's going to cause some real pain for you and some real harm for other people around you until you do that. And I'm hopeful right now that that's kind of what we're going to see play out in the last 3 episodes of this series. But I definitely saw it in this episode where Obi-Wan I don't think he doesn't realize yet that he is going to have to do this on his own. He is going to have to reconnect with the person he actually is and use those tools that he's learned as a Jedi to move forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually found that meditation, because he's praying almost, and he's saying, help me, Master Qui-Gon. Help me, Master Qui-Gon. And he's just repeating this over and over and over again. I want to get to Joanna's comment too, but I just wanted to bring something up, which was I feel like this show is like watching someone go through rehab. or an alcoholic, or someone who's just committed this like terrible crime and having to deal with it, because I felt like, oh, we're going through all the stages of like grief, where you're like angry about it, and then you're in denial, and then you're because he's in denial about it, he's even denying himself, and then denying himself to other people. Then he's angry. Now he's bargaining, and I feel like we're getting to that reckoning point that will then get him to acceptance. And acceptance of these types of traumas is actually like, again, like the key. I remember someone talking about therapy, and that therapy doesn't give you therapy isn't built to like help you get rid of your problems. It gives you the tools to help manage things in your life. It's not to be like, oh, and this is fine now, because things persist, and instead it's built to like help you have the tools to manage those things. I feel like there are two things that I kept thinking of during this episode, which was Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Aang is trying to get to the Avatar state, and he's got to get through all of his chakras. He's got to unlock all of his chakras, and he gets to one of them, and it's his shame. He's carrying around this like tremendous amount of shame, and he has to accept that he did those things that caused shame, and then let that go. And as he's doing that, he's reaching his cosmic self. And I was thinking, oh, we're gonna watch Obi-Wan unlock his chakras. And then I also thought of Legend of Korra, where my favorite line in most anything is Korra is told at near the end of her journey, where she's dealing with so much. When we are at our lowest point, we are open to the greatest amount of change. And that's always stuck with me. I feel like that's what we're gonna see here in this show. By the way, recommend both of those series if you've not watched them. They're like unbelievably great. But also, to jump on Joanna's comment here on the sounds like the hope for the galaxy, Leia, and similar to Children of Men, is a goddess figure. I would actually say that happens so often. All of the movies that I wrote down, all of the things that this show is reminding me of. Logan, the movie Logan, X-23 is a girl. Children of Men, the woman that the protagonist of that show is trying to save, also, a female. I thought of other things. I thought of The Searchers, again, problematic movie, but Natalie Wood is the person that they're trying to save, and really they're trying to save their own soul. That's at the end of it. They're trying to save their own soul. And John Wayne has a problem when they finally find her. For a number of reasons, it's terrible. But again, this movie is not, it's problematic, but it's because he's changed so much. He's not, maybe not worth saving. And then the other thing that I would bring up is The Tempest, the Shakespeare play The Tempest, where I felt like Obi-Wan is very much a Prospero figure who's trying to find his relevance in a non-magical world. Prospero is is like one of my favorite plays, because it's basically like Shakespeare. It's someone trying to do their magic in a world that doesn't want it anymore. And he has with him his daughter Miranda. And Miranda is the Brave New World. That's where that line comes from. So yeah, all of those things happen. I will also say, I believe her name is Adira Pharma, is in this episode from Game of Thrones, and I thought of the Game of Thrones line, which actually bothers me every time I think of it, which is they say Adira Pharma, the person who plays the Mandalorian, of course, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal's in Game of Thrones, and he has a line where he says, "In Dorne, we don't hurt little girls," and Cersei says, "Everywhere in the world they hurt little girls." And that line always bothers me. But I was thinking of, and this is, by the way, a thing that I do have a problem with in the show, which is the amount of cruelty that occurs to children. I am starting to struggle with that in watching this show. That's that type of that's been hard to watch. But I will say that I think that's the message that they're trying to say is that, just reckless disregard for others is, even the most innocent among us can get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just to build on Joanna's comment, I think the goddess figure is everywhere in this, is all over the place, and it echoes from a lot of stories that I think are also really that are coming out right now, from Children of Men to Logan to even something old like The Tempest.
And for anyone watching, Ryan, you've mentioned this in tonight's show and then the last show as well about the sort of cruelty towards children in the show. And I just want to clarify for anybody watching, if you're just catching up or if you haven't seen the episodes yet, we just want to be clear that the cruelty in these stories that we're taught, that Ryan's referring to, and Ryan, I don't want to put words too much in your mouth here, but we're not talking about like physical abuse or things of that nature visually that you watch. It's nothing like that. It's a depiction of what a galaxy in this sort of state is like for children, and it's a very cruel place for children to have to grow up in. I don't know if I encapsulated that well, Ryan, but I want to just make sure for anybody who's just catching us or just casually kind of snooping by and watching the show, we're not talking about kids are being abused in the show. It's nothing like that. Not in the way that may sound on the surface. This is much more about what would it be like to be a kid growing up in an environment like that allows conditions like this to exist. That's what we really mean.
I'll further define myself in this. There's one particular scene that I really felt like was a bit excessive. That happens inside of that like village, and I think you probably know the one I'm going to talk about. So I'm actually not going to talk about it specifically. I'm just going to say I felt like that was like a little too. I feel like sometimes in movies there's things that are unseen that can be just as valid as if you see it. And I will say I was just like, I don't know if I would have went there. And for those of you who have watched this episode will probably know the scene that I'm talking about. Like, I get it. Vader's a ruthless person. He's ruthless. He's evil. I get that this is also to show the desperation of the universe. That when Obi-Wan says, before the dark times, this show is very political. Very, very political. I don't think it's by any accident that what's his name? Freck has he's flying the Imperial flag behind him. And it's easy for people to mix up justice for order, and in fact a character does that on this show. I feel like this is and Jeff, to build on the definition that you were saying about the violence that you see with children in this, it's really the vulnerability of all of us in what is obviously a fascist regime.
100%.
And I think that is to show, because again, there are innocent people that are being roused out of their homes, that are under a military state, that are being forced into servitude. And even Leia, the young actress playing Leia in this show, says, I thought the Empire was built to help us. And it's again, like I think that this show has a lot of statements. I'm just saying some of the violence against some of the most vulnerable is just at times very hard to watch. And I would just call that out as like, if you have a hard time seeing that kind of violence, this is a show that you definitely want to then have the remote in your hand to kind of skip past some of those things. Because the last third of this episode, you really feel that. You feel that threat to that how a military state works.
Yes, 100%. Actually, there's a scene at the very beginning of Rogue One, and I'm trying to remember the exact words that are used, so I may get this wrong, and I apologize, where Galen Erso and his family are living on a particular planet, filmed in Finland, by the way. Beautiful. It looks gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Director Krennic from the Death Star arrives with Death Troopers to come get him and bring him back. And Galen says to Krennic, I think you're confusing peace with terror. I think that's what he says. And Krennic says, well, you got to start somewhere. And I think that phrase, that statement right there encapsulates exactly what you're describing. That is what it's like to live in a regime like this. Some people, like the Krennics of the world, or the others who in this case flew the Imperial banner on the back of the transport, see it as a boon, a benefit to them, and because in their mind they're benefiting from it and they're getting things from it. But that also should tell you a lot about what that means to society, is that those people are only thinking about it in the frame of what am I getting out of this, which allows them to very conveniently ignore the things that are happening to other people because, hey, I'm getting the stuff I want out of it. So you know what? Maybe you're just not putting into it what you get out of it. It makes the comment that Leia's mom says at the very beginning, which is, all I do is wave. She goes, well, Leia, you get out of it what you put into it. I think that's actually kind of analogous to what happens later on when you see that one person, the person who picks him, Freck, when he picks them up, he is getting, let's just say they are getting out of it exactly what they put into it. That character is getting a lot out of the Empire because they're putting a lot into it as well. And it's in their mind, that's what's happening. And it's very fascinating to see that it's totally true. Like, it benefits some people who allow themselves to ignore the things that are happening to others. And that's it. So I want to transition, since we got a little bit of time left before the show's up, before we wrap up for tonight. I wanted to transition just a little bit to a couple other things I thought were kind of interesting in this, that are a little bit outside of Obi-Wan for a minute, onto some of the other subtext or items that I noticed. And one of them was one of the most beautiful scenes, if not the most beautiful scene in the entire episode for me, is when Obi-Wan and Leia are on the back of that transport with the stormtroopers, and he slips up,
what you're gonna bring up.
Calls her Leia, and then when he gets called on that by the stormtrooper, he says, oh, like, I thought you said her name was Luma, and you said Leia, and he looks at her and goes, his exact quote is, sometimes when I look at Luma, I see her mother's face.
Yes.
And, oh, gosh, in that moment, like, I'm like, great job not having to lie. You didn't have to use a forced persuasion to, these aren't the people you're looking for. Didn't have to do any of that. Probably wouldn't even be able to at this point because he's so traumatized by things. But he didn't have to do that because he didn't actually lie. He told the truth when he looked at her, and because it was so heartfelt when he said it, it convinced the stormtroopers that everything is good to go. But that quote to me was just absolutely beautiful. And then I love the follow-up when Leia's asking him, did you know my mother? And then she's like, are you my real father? And he's like,
my real father.
And I like that I really appreciate that the way they set that scene up is he's like, no, I'm not. He didn't correct her and like reinforce what Bale said, that of course you're an Organa. She knows. He's not going to lie to her. But I liked that what he said is, no, I'm... like, unfortunately, no. Like, but the word he uses makes it really feel like he is actually kind of telling her that, like I respect you. No, I wish I did. I mean, that would be an honorable place for me to be if I actually was your father. But no, I am not actually your father. That scene between the two of them was beautiful to me. Like, really, really, I really appreciated that they made sure to put that in there. Because through all the stuff that we've talked about in this episode, that was a scene right there where Obi-Wan was being Obi-Wan. Where he was being the person that we know him to be, which means he is there. Who he is, his center does still exist. He has just lost track of where it is, but it is still him enough that he can fall back on it when he lets himself do it, but he's struggling with that a lot right now. But that's a moment to me that, like, there he is. The second Alice in Wonderland movie that came out, when the caterpillar says to her multiple times in the movie, you're not Alice. A few minutes later, you're only a little bit Alice, and kind of keeps progressively. In the end, now there you are, you're Alice. It was the same thing right there. It's like, see, you're not Obi-Wan. Oh, a little bit. You're a little Obi-Wan right there. Towards the end, it'll be like, there he is. There's Obi-Wan. I'm hoping that's what'll happen by the end of the series. It'll be like, there you are. There you are, Obi-Wan. And because you've noticed, he has made a point of reinforcing to people several times, no, it's just Ben these days. And I think that's gonna be a thing that is pulled, that's gonna be a through line that is pulled on as we get towards the sixth episode of this.
Yeah, I think that's when Ben has to stop being Ben and start being Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Which I think that's a really interesting use. I actually think that's also really cool because I've always thought it was funny when Luke comes into the Death Star to rescue Princess Leia, and Princess Leia, they have their little, back and forth, and then he says, "I'm here with Ben Kenobi," and she says, "Ben Kenobi," and then they run out. And I always thought, like, well, you don't know him as Ben Kenobi. You only know him as Obi-Wan. Why would you be, like, so excited if Ben Kenobi's here? And
good old Ben.
So actually, yeah, exactly. And so now I'm like, oh, cool. Like, this actually makes a little bit more sense now. Like, I'm sure that's like a line in the script, but it all works out. I wrote down that line too. I see her mother's face, and we all miss her very much.
Mm-hmm.
And which I thought was also a well-delivered line. There was another thing that happened in the back of the truck, which, by the way, again, like the expert use of the time in a show like this. I am really disappointed, with the exception of Strange New Worlds, which is a show that I can't recommend enough. Oh my gosh, I just watched the latest episode, and like. Also just like great, lot of fun episode. But all of the other Star Trek series really struggle with the fact that they have like 10 episodes that they're shooting. And because they're not episodic, they try to tell a story over 10 hours. And it's a disaster. And it's because they are trying to fill time. They're trying to set up small side plots. And again, the Mario problem exists where you're going from castle to castle until you get to level 9. And then suddenly in the last penultimate, in the penultimate episode, you get all the pieces. And then in the last episode, everything starts. It's hurry up and finish. This show is doing something different, which I like, which is the Mandalorian did this, by the way, very well, which is they're making each episode count. They're taking the time, and in the back of that truck that they're riding in, or it's not a truck, it's like a speeder, but I'm just gonna say it's a truck.
It's a truck. It's a farm
truck. They have the Obi-Wan family memories, which, wow, that was great. Obi-Wan remembers his family and can recall
that he had a family.
That he had a family. He can recall a woman's shawl, his mother's shawl, his father's hands. He can recall a baby, and he thinks he had a brother. And these are. And then I had to leave. And I had to start a new and I had a new family. I actually wrote this part down because it almost kind of made me think of it's kind of like an indictment of the Jedi. I hate to say that, but like, and then I was taken from my family and brought to the Jedi so I could be trained. And that actually was just like, oof. That doesn't. I don't know if that necessarily puts the Jedi in the best light. But yeah, like I loved that scene of Obi-Wan with his child memories of his family. I think I had a brother. Gosh, that was great. I did not expect that dimension to be included in the character.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. That made me happy to hear that. It really did. I actually was very happy or content that he said the line that you just brought up, which is, "Oh, that's probably not the one you want to say for the Jedi," because him saying I was taken from my family. I'm glad they did that. Not because I'm glad they did it because there's so much controversy the other day, like Jedi take people from the kids from their homes and all that. It's like, no, we know that's not true, blah blah blah. But I like that they brought that here because it's all a matter of perspective. It's also all a matter of how you emphasize the word. And in his mind, he is saying that phrase out of like, I had a new family and the Jedi are my family. But it also leaves some insinuation that almost him considering what would my life have been like what would this world have been like had I never gone to the Jedi. And it also made me think in that moment as like a branch, like a multiversal branch effect in my mind of I wonder how many times Obi-Wan has thought, what if I never went to the Jedi? Would this have all been avoided? Would this have even happened if I had never come to the Jedi? I could easily
Magical thinking, man. Magical
yes,
thinking.
I could easily see that him letting himself go down that path that leads to the sort of like reinforcement of the trauma, sort of like venting. Like venting doesn't help you. It doesn't. I've been learning this through therapy. Like venting doesn't help you. It just forces you to relive something that you've already lived, and you still get frustrated. But there's no outcome that gets you out of the frustration. All it does is dig you further into it. That him saying that was almost an allowance to her of like, this is a good thing, but also but I don't always see it that way even now. And I thought that was very interesting. And I have to believe that in a show like this, especially with a director like Deborah Chow, that lines like that were not left in there by pure chance. Words like that were picked very in particularly. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of deliberate choices on this. I know that we're coming up to time, and by the way, like this is a serious show, so I'm sorry if not. Like when we were talking about The Mandalorian, we're coming in here and like woo, and we were talking about Book of Boba Fett, and I was like, I don't like that guy spinning around, Jeff. But
I do still need my blue Vespa. I need my Vespa. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly right. But by the way, like we'll just be honest. Like we're just getting into it, you know, and we're taking each episode as it goes. It's not a depressing show, and it's not a bad show, and it's not one that's going to make you feel like you got all the negative feelings. It's going to make you feel. And I guess that's the thing that I just want to like stress about this, is that this is a deliberately crafted show about someone working through trauma with a lightsaber, and and how we all deal with those things, and how we try to protect innocent people from those things, and maybe even help teach them about those things for their life. That's the show that's going on. So not high adventure, more like high emotion, like high empathy. And I don't throw that around. And I would say it's high emotion for a Star Wars movie. This is or a Star Wars show. This is just very different than anything else that I've ever watched from Star Wars. I will say, do you want to do a quick lightning round on fun things from the show? I made notes about fun things that I liked. I loved the Mustafar set. I thought that was well played. I loved Vader on his stone throne.
Oh yeah.
That was great. I loved hearing James Earl Jones' voice again. I hope that was James Earl Jones.
It is absolutely him. We heard it confirmed this week. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I liked how the loader droids look like Master Chief from Halo.
Oh yeah,
much better than the actual Halo show. I loved the Ghost Anakin because, again, I'm a big fan of Westerns, and a ghost on the prairie is like a concept. And that's also a concept in like Native American lore. It's a concept in my own culture's lore. My family is Mexican on my mother's side, and there's a lot of really great stories about what's out there on the prairie and in the way out. I loved that it was a ghost of Anakin that he saw, and that it was angry. Other things that I thought were great was I loved the character design of Freck, and then that was voiced by Zach Braff, being the most un-Zach Braffian that I could ever imagine. And then I think you and I are probably gonna both freaked out about that
Quinlan Voss.
Yeah, gosh, I loved that.
The look of levity in Obi-Wan's face is like, Quinlan. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, he helps out every now and again. I'm like, oh, he's actually still alive. I'm like, oh, at least at that point, he's still alive. I'm like, oh, that is fantastic. That made me super happy. One this I don't know if this would be levity at all, but bit of lightning round that I really enjoyed was Reva, third sister in the cave, seeing the Jedi symbol on the wall, and the
Oh
look
yeah.
on her face. I wrote down Reva is dealing with her own trauma connected with the Jedi based on her reaction to that symbol. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
I'm like, we already sort of suspected that anyway. Like it was her and Obi-Wan or whatever. I'm like, no. This is her in the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan's the spearhead for it because that there's a message out there. All the Jedi saw this message. I'm like, oh, okay. She's got some sort of connected trauma with the Jedi overall, which is how she got into the Inquisitors. I'm like, okay. Yeah, that was really cool. I really appreciated seeing that.
Yeah, I because she also knows too that she calls Darth Vader by his actual name. She calls him Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
She says you don't realize that he's alive. And
Yes.
and by the way, like I liked this is episode 2, which we were going to talk about I think tonight, but episode 3 is just like a big episode.
Yeah, it really
But
is.
in episode 2 there's a very like Return of the Jedi like vibes of like looking for Luke underneath the throne, and Reva is looking for
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan among all of these like kind of cargo containers, and she's kind of like taunting him, and it's just great. I mean, it's all like amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she says is she says, "Oh, you don't know. You don't know. He's Anakin Skywalker. He's alive." And so that actually tipped me off to like, oh well, she's a Jedi if she knows that that's Anakin. And then yeah, like there was just so many little things that I loved in this episode. But I think I truly loved the beginning part because I just felt like that really set the stage, which is just the desperation of Obi-Wan. Help me, Master Qui-Gon. Help me, Master Qui-Gon. And I want to say he says, and Jeff, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think he says he's coming. And that he knows he's gonna have to face Anakin.
I don't think I caught that, but yeah,
yeah,
it was big.
He just sounds terrified. He sounds terrified.
Oh, I mean, yes, I would be
and
too.
Looks terrified. Looks
he
terrified.
does.
Again,
Oh my god.
Yeah, Vader pops up out of the desert. Hops up out of the desert. There's nowhere for him to hide. What's the first thing that he does? He runs away. I mean, gosh, I that was the opposite of what I expected, and everything that I liked about that episode is that this character ran away. Was like bye, like just ran away from it, and then in a very similar scene to what happens to Luke on Cloud City when Luke's right before Luke is separated from his hand. Luke is walking into this thing, and you just hear this like ooh, kind of sound, and you can hear his almost his breath, and then you hear Darth Vader's breath, and then it's just the lightsaber comes down, and it's like this terrifying moment in Empire Strikes Back. It's almost like a horror movie moment, which at times. And I'm a horror fan. I came around to it. This show at times feels like it has elements of a horror or a thriller.
Yeah.
Like in the first episode when you cut to the Anakin in the back to tank, or the what is that the second episode that cuts to the Anakin in the back to tank. Second episode. Cut to and that to me reminded me so much of like Halloween. The paleness of his skin, it almost looks like a mask on. But yeah, there's the hunting of someone in a desert where you can't hide. And at night, and Darth Vader is so dark you can't see him in the dark except for the lights on him.
Which I love. I love how they played that up to make him even more ominous. Oh god, it just it was amazing.
Yeah, he's like a spirit, and he almost floats because of that cape. And this is your comment about Deborah Chow, I believe is her name of the director, just did such a great job. I have one complaint, and I know that we're way over time, Jeff.
Go for it.
So I'm sorry to keep going here. I have one complaint. And it's I already brought up my issue with again, like I think they went a little too violent in this one, and I didn't really like that. There was one scene in particular, and I think people will know what I'm talking about. But I wish this, and I don't have another phrase for this, Jeff, so I'm just going to say this. I wish this was more cinematic. This is being shot on sets, obviously, because of how, there's only so much money they can throw at this. This doesn't have a Rise of Skywalker size of budget. This doesn't have a massive budget. This has the same budget as The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wish I could see this being shot in like like a big budget movie.
Yeah.
Because there were times where I wish the camera could pull out so that way I could see more of what's around them. That I wish that the sets, like as stark as things are, I wish these sets were more. There was more to them, and I think that they have done amazing with what they have, and have probably maxed out, if not gone beyond their budget, probably. But I just wish that this had a budget of a full Star Wars movie, because I feel like these scenes in particular would have benefited from it. This is all tightly shot. It's all tight shots on people, and that's because budget. Like, it's just how it works. I would have loved to have seen a couple of really big wide shots, and I think that would have really helped to establish almost the peril that Obi-Wan's in. He's all by himself. That's just I wish I could have had a little bit more cinematic elements that I think you only get in a big budget movie.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, listen, this has been great. It's been great in so much as that it's a hard show to watch. And hard.
Yes.
It's a show everyone right now should go watch this. Joanna, I'm telling you, you need to just, if you're not watching it already and you're just paying attention to us, thank you, but go watch the show. It's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
And there's only 3 episodes left. And I'm really curious to see how it plays out, but I'm very much with you that they've moved it along very quickly in just 3 episodes. So there's no delay. I think it is getting right into stories immediately, and it's very well done. Thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. Bring it up. Please subscribe if you want to catch more of it. We're doing this every week. We'll be catching the releases and doing this throughout the show with a recap when we're all done. But we'd love you to join us. Love you to be part of it on a regular basis. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up for tonight. Ryan?
Yeah.
It's been awesome, dude.
Hey, thanks very much, everybody. Looking forward to catching up next week. We'll cover episode 4.
All right. Cheers, everybody. See ya.
Bye, everyone.